manipulative. We're live Saturday, day 10. We are reading A Peculiar Indifference by Elliott Currie. We're at the tail end of chapter 4, and at the pretty much almost a, I look real white. Yeah, I look real white. I do.
Was standing there at the time, so I figured I was already on shaky ground with one of you. So I wouldn't say nothing, but yes, both of you really did.
Yeah, why is that? Why is that?
Yeah, you see?
My forehead looks lighter, but like
Changes the
the
complexion of
light.
your skin?
No, I didn't. I'm not Sammy Sosa.
Maybe you need like a background screen over here.
I don't like
I like them looking live. I like them looking less
Just
dark.
wait till you get over here.
No, the melanin, it don't work on getting the melanin. I would still look the same as my dark. I won't look lighter.
All right, let's see.
Probably make me look as white as that page.
Oh,
Let's see. Go ahead.
The hand is
asking
fine.
to touch
The
my
hand.
hair.
Is this
No.
You see?
Oh, see?
No.
No, a little
Say
bit.
no.
A little
Stop
bit.
it.
No,
Stop.
a little
Stop.
bit. You can see it.
Stop.
You see it. You can see
I'm
it.
just not as dark.
Look how
Like
white
the
my
picture
hand
don't look
is.
as dark. But see, y'all look. You almost look like you
Oh,
glowing
yeah.
some. Look, you almost
Yeah,
look like
yeah.
you're glowing
Yeah,
some.
that's
But
crazy.
you see, it's just
Like how the ring light was.
Yeah,
Like how
like
the
that.
ring light.
When I'm up
The
here,
ring light was
it's
nuts.
real light, but when I'm down,
Okay, we're gonna get.
Oh damn, we just started off a whole video about how white we look. They're gonna cut that excerpt out and try to cancel it. That's gonna come back to bite us.
No, it's not. It's
Blame it
not.
on me. I'll the one to be canceled.
Oh no.
Can't do
I didn't know Rockford was participating.
good. I saw something about donuts.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. We are at the tail end of chapter 4, and coincidentally at the tail end of the book almost. So we're up until page 167. Chapter 4 is called Contemporaries. Okay. Anderson, and talks about, when it says Anderson, just to give complete context, I believe, what was Anderson's first name? Elijah Anderson. When it says Anderson, it's in reference to Elijah Anderson, a sociologist. Anderson has been criticized for seeming at times to suggest that it is mainly black youth's adherence to street culture that now holds them back and keeps them from fully participating in conventional institutions like school and work. And that burden is on black youth themselves to change their outlook on the world. Simply providing opportunities is not enough, he insists in Code of Street. Young people must also be encouraged to adopt an outlook that allows them to invest their considerable personal resources in available opportunities, and to leave behind the attitudes, values, and behavior that work to block their advancement into the mainstream. But this raises the question of how much it really makes sense to urge poor black youth to join the mainstream when the very idea of a mainstream has become problematic. When stability and economic security have retreated even for the children of what used to be the middle class. For many of the youth, Anderson described, arriving at a different outlook may in practice mean trying to adjust to a world full of neglectful education, low wage work, and diminished futures. That is a troubling implication, and in fact, Anderson's language fits uneasily with his frequent advocacy for better jobs or for inner city youth. But his observations of contemporary Philadelphia descended in a straight line from early observers and support their core argument. Inner city violence is the product of a toxic mix of constricted opportunities and the abandonment of black communities by public institutions of security and support. Similar themes appear again and again and qualitative work done in the roughly 2 decades since Code of the Street was written. They appear, for example, in a study by Joseph Richardson and his colleagues of young men convicted of violent crimes, mostly armed robbery, who were serving time in an urban jail in an unnamed large East Coast city. All of them, indeed, 100% of youth confined in the part of this jail reserved for juvenile offenders. Okay, I'm sorry, my fault. Tempo was wrong. All of them, indeed, 100% of youth confined in this part of the jail reserved for juvenile offenders were black. All of them lived in impoverished neighborhoods with high crime rates, violence, and unemployment. Though they were all between 15 and 17 years old, their reading level ranged from 4th to 8th grade, and some were functionally illiterate. Tellingly, the researchers had planned to have the youth read books about gang violence in order to prepare them for their focus group, but ended up using films instead because so many of them could not read. The level of violence these young men had experienced both as victims and as perpetrators was extraordinary. All of them said that they had carried firearms daily. All had witnessed a serious violent assault, and roughly 3 in 4 said they had personally witnessed a homicide. They took for granted what they would encounter. They took for granted that they would encounter violence regularly on the street, and often described their own use of violence as a form of labor. Living under conditions of chronic unemployment and marginalized from opportunities in labor markets, they regarded economic crime in particular, including robbery, burglary, and drug dealing, as one of the few kinds of work realistically available to them. They routinely used the phrase "putting in work" to describe not only those economic crimes but other forms of personal violence that they engaged in. Let me see. I lost my spot for a second. Here we are. Many youth in the study, the researchers wrote, proceed building a reputation and acquiring and maintaining respect through the use of violence as a full-time occupation. And they work constantly to build and defend their reputations while simultaneously working to earn income from crime and violence. One young man they called Dre put it this way: "Nobody around our neighborhoods is working, so hitting somebody's head is like working. Youngins in my neighborhood already know they're not going to get no job, and they're not going to get in no college. So for them, this is work. This is how they work. Bottom line, no matter what world you in, the underworld, the real world, whatever world, people want to be respected. In the underworld, the street world, you progress and get respect by putting in work, doing things that other people in the real world might think is wrong, like laying somebody down. For us, hitting somebody's head might be the only way to deal with a situation. For some, it might bother you at first. You might have nightmares about it. But after you put in more work, you get used to it. That's just how it is." As to rate the safety of their community on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most dangerous, one youth said, "I would rate it a 20. It's always somebody getting shot. It's always somebody getting shot in my neighborhood." Everyone of the respondents, according to the researchers, expressed the need to carry a weapon at all times for protection. "I carry my gun anywhere I go. one 17-year-old said. I mean, I gotta crush someone, then I will. If I gotta crush somebody, then I will. I don't care. It's either him or me. Another revealed that he even carried his gun to the local mosque where he attended services on Friday afternoons. He acknowledged that he might be safe in the mosque, but you still have to get back home. Richardson and his colleagues found that this dynamic was even more intense inside the jail than on the street. Young men behind bars felt they had to be hypervigilant and always cognizant of the potential risk for violent victimization. But they also found that the jail system did little to help. Despite the extraordinary needs presented by the youth, despite the extraordinary needs presented by the young men in the jail and other detention facilities for violent youth, including stunningly high levels of illiteracy and mental illness, the services available to them were typically minimal to non-existent, rendering them unprepared for the eventual return to distressed communities where violence, crime, and infectious diseases are pervasive, and accessible health and mental health care are scarce. So the cycle of violence and response continues. So reading this, it makes me think about if the city has to close down a library, there ain't no question of where which library they're closing down. If they got to move a hospital, the hospital is getting updated. There's no question what hospital is getting shut down, what hospital is getting updated, or new hospital is going to get put in. So we're going to keep going. Let's see. I lost my spot. Okay. Right here. I'm sorry. Now I didn't. I found it. The researchers also found that extremely violent incarcerated youth often developed a kind of numbness to the consequences of their actions. Reflecting the desensitization we explored in Chapter 2. They tended to believe that anyone who wound up as a victim probably had it coming. We always say in my neighborhood, if you got dead, then your ass probably deserved it. And they often display the sense of futurelessness we've already encountered. As one 17-year-old put it, no matter what you do out here, you're gonna die anyway. You can die stepping off a bus into the street. I mean, what's the difference? We all gotta die. The criminologist Timothy Brezina and his colleagues found that the same murder was central to the existential outlook of young men involved in street violence in Atlanta. A pervasive fatalism combined with a deeply pessimistic view of their chances of achieving a different kind of life bred a kind of nihilism in which not much mattered, even the likelihood of their own death. This meant, in effect, that anything was possible and indeed justifiable. I say fuck tomorrow, one of their informants told them. It's all about today. Might not be it tomorrow. Might get shot. Might get hit by a bus. So get it now. Now. Next week might as well be next century. Fuck next week. Fuck tomorrow. The Atlanta researchers speculated that this attitude facilitates violence in part by erasing young men's replacing you can read for a second. The Atlanta researchers.
All right. Oh shit! I already got another pair of headphones in. Okay. All right. That was a quick switch. Oh, I do look a little. Oh, yeah, I do look a little more like that. Okay. Yes. Oh, appreciate you.
Buy some snacks or some shit, I guess.
Thank you. We'll see you later, man. Yeah. We gotta talk about that again some more. What you were just talking to me about. Yeah. All right, we are on page 172, and it wasn't supposed to be cold no more. It's just crazy. All right, where we at? These studies in 1997. The Atlanta. Okay. The Atlanta researchers speculated that this attitude facilitates violence in part by erasing young men's natural fear of their own injury or death, but it seems also to involve something more general and even more troubling, what we might call a suspension of care, a shedding of concern for the lives of others as well as oneself, in the context of a world that is perceived as both unpredictable and without clearly discernible meaning. They quote one 70-year-old to this effect. My way of looking at this is, God gonna take everybody, okay? Gonna take me, gonna take you. So what the fuck am I gonna care for anybody? I'm not. I'm gonna get mine, and if I have to kill your ass to do it, so what? You kill me, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? So what's the point? Might as well win. Somebody gotta win, somebody gotta lose. Gotta win until you lose. When you lose, you dead. Another young man says, quote, there's only a short time in the world for everybody. I'm going to make yours shorter than mine. Believe that. I don't think anybody but me and mine. You hear me? No sympathy, no way. A young man the researchers call Chris shows how this worldview can breed a kind of reflexive and amoral opportunism. Quote, if I see something I want, I'll take it right then because that might be your only chance in this world to get some. Somebody might be shooting dice on the curb or something. I walk up and take all the money. So like that. Intertwined with low quote unquote survival expectations, then is something more profound, an acceptance of the world as a dog-eat-dog place where you can't depend on anyone but yourself. In the absence of more conventional skills and capacities, all you have to rely on is your ability to inspire fear, to be unambiguously hard. These studies focus on the responses of young people at the extreme, youth who are not just, quote, at risk of becoming involved in violence, but already deeply enmeshed in it. But communities show that the sense of hope, but other studies of children and youth in impoverished black communities show that the youth in impoverished black communities show that the same sense of hopelessness and loss of meaning bred by endemic poverty, violence, and marginalization is not confined to a small, quote, hardcore. In the 1990s, for example, Robert Duran of Harvard Medical School and his colleagues interviewed children and youth aged 11 to 19 in 9 very poor public housing projects in Augusta, Georgia. The level of violence they found was extraordinary. 84% of the interviewees reported engaging in some kind of violent behavior. Fully 1/4 of the boys reported having been involved in a gang fight. More than a third say they had carried a weapon within the last 30 days, and 1 in 5 said they had attacked someone with the weapon, quote, with the idea of seriously hurting or killing them. 1/4 of the girls as well said they had carried a weapon at some point, the majority of these within the last 30 days. You pop back in? Or how would you? You know what I mean? I'm going to be here, I know it's you. It's a lot of this one left. Let's see, we didn't finish it though. It was like, it's 390. So if you want to keep on reading, I think it's fine. I'm fine with keep on reading. I'll be here. Okay. Let's see. Wait, what did you say? Okay. Yeah, okay. I thought it took me a second. I had to realize it after I turned. I'm like, wait a minute. Daniel told me some nut shit. He said that schools get funded based on the property tax of the houses in the neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah. You knew that?
I didn't know that. Where are you?
That light, yep, right there.
Okay.
Shit nuts.
I didn't know that. Even in these very poor projects, not all young people have been involved in violence, much less serious violence. But those who were, Durant found, had several things in common. One was having been the victims of violence in the past. Another was what the researchers called the hopelessness of social immobility. Youth who committed less violence, on the other hand, were more likely to feel that they had a purpose in life and to expect to be alive at age 25. I wasn't supposed to make it past 25. Damn.
Oh, because he knocked it over.
Oh.
He had like good mic check.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The long running study of South in Mobile, Alabama. The long running study of youth in Mobile, Alabama, I mentioned in Chapter 2, illustrates how deeply entrenched this syndrome of poverty, hopelessness, and violence remains, well into the area of the crime decline. All told, between 1998 and 2006, the Mobile study. Some people say Mobile.
Mobile, Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a city at the end?
Mm-hmm. It's Mobile? Yeah. You would say Mobile? Mm.
Rappers say Mobile.
Mobile. Okay. The Mobile study involved more than 7,000. The Mobile study involved more than 7,000 youth drawn from some sort of severely deprived parts of one of the most poverty-stricken urban areas in the county. Neighborhoods where the average poverty rate was 57%, and nearly a third of residents subsisted on less than half the poverty level. Focusing on a sample of more than 700 of these youth, aged 10 to 18, and more than 94% African American. Mobile. The Mobile researchers found that in Augustina, striking numbers of them were involved in violence, often beginning at very young ages. But others were not, and which path they took was heavily influenced by what researchers called trajectories of hopelessness. Many children of all genders began adolescence with a relatively low levels of hopelessness and stayed that way throughout. But others displayed an increasing sense of hopelessness over time, and it was among them that violence was the highest. Among the boys, half of those who were characterized as becoming increasingly hopeless over time had either threatened someone with a weapon in the past 90 days, or actually shot or stabbed somebody during the past year. Surprisingly, the connection between hopelessness and violence weakened as the youth got old. During late adolescence, the proportion of boys who were involved in violence with a weapon was nearly the same among those who showed an increasing sense of hopelessness and those who reported declining levels of hopelessness. But the researchers suggested that this was not necessarily good news. It may have simply meant that the ever-present threat of violence around them bred a defensive violence among many boys from these neighborhoods, irrespective of what they thought about their futures. By that point, violence may have become less a response for a bleak outlook on the future than a practical strategy for defending themselves in an increasingly volatile world. At the turn of the century, Kenneth Clark, in the 1960s, the early students of the roots of violence in African American communities offered what at bottom were strikingly similar analysis of the source of the problem and strikingly similar warnings about what the future of these communities will look like with the absence of fundamental social change. Despite some differences in the settings they examined, the methods they employed, and the analytical tools they brought to bear, at the end of the day, all of these observers wound out with the same essential message. Violence within the black community from those white people, and to their powerlessness to do so much about them. And the implications for social action were clear. Racial disparities and violence will be with us until and unless we address the deep inequalities that white America had created and enforced for generations. Another half-century of research has not seriously challenged that analysis or shaken those implications. It shows that contemporary black communities struggle with violence as a direct reflection of generations of economic and social disadvantages that remain largely unaddressed. There are differences of emphasis among various studies, and there are controversies about the precise mechanisms that link racial inequality to violence. But there is no real dispute about the bigger picture. Violence flourishes in the communities where many people have been stripped of their social support and opportunities that they need to thrive, and where their expectations of personal security and meaningful future have been systematically thwarted or stillborn in a society distinctive for its general heedlessness and neglectful of social policies. These conditions have affected some people of every race. But enduring discrimination has made African Americans especially vulnerable. Nothing short of restoring these stolen opportunities and depleted supports will suffice to eliminate the long-standing racial inequalities of life and death. In the next chapter, I want to explore what that might mean in practice. That concludes chapter 4. Now we're on to chapter 5, the last chapter of the book.
What do you think of the book so far? What you read?
I thought it fit in very well with the previous two books that we read. It talked a little bit about how affluent African Americans would still be regulated to these poorer communities, and they would have how the struggles they would face, even if they were wealthy or they were more well off. That it made me think of the caste system. The example she gave of Thabo Sefolosha getting his leg broken by the police, and the NFL player who had I forget his name. That's mess. They're brothers.
I thought maybe you talk about the two brothers, where one of them was on the Patriots for the Super Bowl, one a tight end, one played defense. Bennett.
Oh, the Bennett brothers. Oh yeah. That wasn't brought up. I think that was Michael. Michael Bennett. I think Michael had that interaction with the police. In Vegas. In Vegas, yeah. So it talked about that, and it was able as maybe it's because the second week, or maybe it's just books, but it's been easier for me to be able to. They talked about in this book, and I think that's something it's important that they all, not that they all, but there are certain beats that every book touches on. Tell me the levels of depth that they go into. They vary, but it's good that each book reinforces that same type of ideas and the same type of problems, but also some of the remedies to that. What is that? There was a section in there about not only are African Americans are they not allowed to do certain things, but oftentimes they're forced to watch white people do the things that they're not allowed to do, which brought me right back to The Color of Law, when the little leaguer had to watch the white children in the pool. Okay. So now we're on to chapter 5. The last chapter of the book is called Remedies. Is the boy?
I've heard different people.
Yeah.
People say that differently, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either.
No idea what that was. I've heard the boys.
Dubois? I never heard Dubois. I feel like I've been. What do you say?
I've heard people say WB Dubois.
Mm.
Boys, like one other iteration.
I feel like I've heard of
Boy.
Dubois. The boy.
So without the W, like not a W, like it's just a not a boy. Boys.
No, the boy.
The boy.
The boy.
WB the boy.
Yeah. But I don't know.
Oh yeah, that would be the third one. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that's the three
that-
I've heard.
that's-
Yeah. The boy.
And the boys.
Yeah.
You said hold on.
Wait.
You said two of them twice. You said one twice. I mean, you said the boy, and the boys.
Just read. I'm done.
The boy, the boy,
Yeah.
the boy.
The boy.
Okay, WED. I'm gonna go with the boy. I'm gonna go with the boy. I'm gonna go with the boy. More than a century after WED, Du Bois, moved into Philadelphia's troubled 7th Ward, murder still at... Let me start that one over. More than a century after W.E.D. Du Bois moved into Philadelphia's troubled 7th Ward, murder still sits at the doorsteps in all too many African American communities. Of all the stubbornly enduring racial inequalities in our society, the racial divide and the experience of violence is one of the most profound and consequential. The most urgent remedies flow naturally from the analysis of the cause. We see that the endemic violence in many black communities reflect the extraordinary levels of deprivation, insecurity, and thwarted opportunity they continue to face even in times of great wealth and strong economic growth in the society as a whole. Those problems are deepened by the ongoing legacy of racial segregation and by a system of social control that itself too often adds to the danger of African Americans face rather than protecting them from it. Violence is bred by the continuing presence of living conditions that, at the extreme, more closely resemble those in much poorer countries than in the rest of the developed world, and are so far removed from those of most whites, it is difficult even to compare them. Excuse me. It should go without saying that not all black communities in the United States share those deprived conditions, and that even those that do possess impressive reservoirs of energy, commitment, and skills, but in the midst of unprecedented national wealth and technological capacity, too many Americans still suffer from a toxic mix of adversities that include extreme poverty, desperately inadequate schools and public services, inaccessible and inferior health care, and the ongoing crisis of joblessness and youth disconnection that is disturbingly resistant to economic growth. The communities can justifiably be described as abandoned, and that abandonment has worsened in some ways. in the current social and political climate. There are, to be sure, some things we could do, and are doing, to reduce violence without directly addressing that abandonment. But, with some exceptions, with some exceptions that we'll consider in a moment, those alternatives cannot by themselves take us very far. Keep in mind that we already have tried some of them. We have tried to deal with the massive public health crisis through small, underfunded programs. We have tried to deal with it through vastly increased punishment and surveillance. One of the most thoroughly implemented experiences in social engineering. But people keep dying. How you doing? Do you?
I was just trying to get out the rain. That's it. I'm moving into the. I have an understanding. Yeah. So I know you guys are on a mission. I get it. Yeah. I don't want to be on a mission.
In this chapter, I want to talk about some of the things that might make a real difference. This is not an exhaustive list of every program and every policy that shows some process in helping to reduce violence. Many approaches have been found to be modestly effective, at least in the short term. And I will mention some of them here. But if we have learned one thing from decades of experience, it is that even well-conceived initiatives, but because they have fewer people at risk in the first place. So I want to focus here on some key strategies to address the roots of violence that emerge from the accumulated research. Most of these are not altogether new. They are not variations on remedies that careful observers have been urging for a long time. The cornerstone of any serious effort to reduce the burden of endemic violence must be a guarantee of meaningful employment for everyone able to work at wages that can support a decent standard of living. Doing this is crucial for two related reasons. First, good jobs themselves directly attack the marginalization, deprivation, hopelessness, and insecurities from which violence grows. Second, a full employment strategy can also provide the human resources that will enable us to address the other fundamental adversities that are routinely associated with racial disparities and violence. Neglected schools, inadequate health care and mental health. Let me start this over. My fault. Okay. Neglected schools, inadequate health and mental health care, a reactive and counterproductive criminal justice system, and much more. It is therefore the single most critical element in a strategy to build the thriving communities of support and opportunity that are the best defense against violence in the long run. In the United States as a whole, damn, I didn't know what that was. I promise I'm not this color. In the United States as a whole, the overall black rate of unemployment is currently about twice that of whites. In some states, it is even higher than that. As 2019 began, it was triple the white rate in Alabama and close to that in Mississippi. That gap persists in spite of the considerable economic growth since the Great Recession. I promise I'm not this color. Okay. The fact that overall black unemployment rate remained double that of whites in 2019 tells us that economic growth alone is not enough to close the gap. The economic crisis created by the policy response to the coronavirus in 2020, moreover, has put an end to this period of declining unemployment, at least for now. And the disconnect between economic growth and the availability of good work is most pronounced among black youth. In 2017, when the economy had been expanding for several years, nearly a quarter of black high school graduates aged 18 to 21 who were not enrolled in future schooling were officially unemployed. That was lower than the rate at the height of the recession, but it was still higher than at the start of the 21st century, and roughly twice the rate for white high school graduates. What's more, the U.S. Department of Labor only considered people as unemployed if they are not only jobless but have actively looked for a job in the past 4 weeks. The official unemployment figures, therefore, notoriously understate the depth of the job problem. Since they leave out those who have been given up on finding employment and are out of the labor force altogether, or who still want a job but for one reason or another have not looked for a job in the past month, more comprehensive measures of joblessness give a fuller picture, particularly when we look at the places where the problem is most concentrated. In Chicago, for example, according to a report from the Great Cities Initiative of the University of Illinois at Chicago, slightly more than half of black men aged 20 to 24 were out of work in 2016, where out of work was defined to include both the officially unemployed and those out of the labor force. That was more than twice the proportion of non-Hispanic white men that same age. An even more troubling number tracked by the Great Cities Initiative is the proportion of youth who are disconnected from work and civic life, meaning that they neither have a job nor are enrolled in school. Nationwide, almost 1 million young black men and women ages 16 to 24 were disconnected by this definition in 2017. In Chicago, among black men ages 20 to 24, the disconnected rate reached 45%, 6 times the rate among white men of that age, and more than twice the rate for Latino men. In that city alone, nearly 13,000 black men aged 20 to 24 were neither in school nor at work. The young black women in Chicago fared almost as badly. Over 30% of them were disconnected from school and work in 2017, more than 7 times the proportion of their white counterparts. In some Illinois counties, that could be Winnebago. Okay, I would not be surprised if this was Winnebago. In some Illinois counties, from 2012 to 2016, the proportion of black youth of all sexes out of school and out of work topped 60%. While they did not name Winnebago County directly, I would not be shocked in the slightest bit at all if Winnebago is one of these Illinois counties where black youth of all sexes out of school and out of work top 60%. That's not again. Oh, let me just keep reading. The Great Cities Report. The Great Cities Reports also point to another critical part of the job problem. Not only are startling numbers of young people working. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. My fault. The Great Cities Report. The Great City Reports also point to another critical part of the job problem. Not only are startling numbers of young people, particularly young minority men, out of work altogether, but many of those who do work are also in the low-wage jobs that have accounted for most of the recent employment growth in the state. The problem is compounded by the fact that increasing numbers of youth are able to find only part-time jobs, making it hard to obtain anything approaching economic security. A recent report by the Economic Policy Institute demonstrates this on the national level. Almost 28% of young black high school graduates who are not enrolled in Almost 28% of young black high school graduates who are not enrolled in future schooling, it shows, are underemployed, which includes not only the official unemployment, which includes not only the official unemployed, but also those working only part-time when they want full-time jobs, and those who have looked for work within the past year, but not within the last few weeks. Measured this way, underemployment among both Latinos and non-Hispanic whites is bad enough. 18% to 19% of them are underemployed by this definition. But they do not approach the rate for African Americans. And these are high school graduates. You want to take over?
Let's pause it.
Let's pause it.
Use the bathroom.
I gotta use the bathroom as well. We're gonna pause it. We'll be back 10 minutes.